Part 1. Long live the failures.
The self-help industry. What is it? Why does it fill me with such overwhelming rage? And why is it not dead yet? I mean, we've been through this 1,000 times, at least on the nebulously leftist video essay side of the internet. You can't solve societal problems with individual solutions. Obviously, I'm not saying people are not allowed to give or seek personal advice. Life is full of problems and we are reasonable in seeking solutions. But there's got to be some sort of limit. I've been unemployed for about a year now and tragically had to do the unthinkable and make a LinkedIn account. A moment of silence for my sanity. Job seeking, well, sucks, so people complain and ask questions and try to provide counsel to others. One recurring theme is reframing failure. Countless users telling you how to obscure resume gaps, present your weakest sides as learning opportunities, and stay optimistic about yet another company ghosting you after the 5th interview. As a potential employee, you must be perfect. You cannot mess up. You have to turn every personal fault, ignoring for now the absurdity of resume gaps being seen as faults, into an asset. This is, frankly, revolting. Not only because I despise the whole masquerade of professionalism, but because, in my opinion, it's making us scared to admit failure in any other context. Personally, I am a failure of a human being and I have little desire to deny it. I suck at so much stuff and I'm honestly surprised I even got this far. It used to be a debilitating struggle. It prevented me from trying anything new because I was dreading the discovery of yet another thing I cannot do well. But these days, I'm a genuine enjoyer of doing things badly. I'm taking up hobbies that require decent visual sense, fine motor control and hand-eye coordination, like crochet and analog collage. I do not have those skills and I doubt I will ever excel at them. The crafts I'm making look like shit, and I'm still making them. So far, it's been a real exercise, both in overcoming my perfectionism and separating myself from the demands of society. If I go into it with no artistic vision and no expectations, I cannot disappoint myself. And if I'm doing something badly, well, no one is gonna suggest I sell it on Etsy. You cannot commercialize amateur crap, but you can enjoy and cherish it. Another thing that I really suck at is video games. I avoided every game with more than a lick of combat my entire life because the many fruitless attempts at beating the tutorial boss usually led to teary-eyed rage quitting. And then I got into Hollow Knight, a notoriously difficult Metroidvania that people compare to Dark Souls, and yeah, I also sucked and quit after 2 hours because I couldn't get past Gru's mother. Actually, I couldn't even go past that big guy with a club that is guarding the grub. That bad. I picked it up again when me and my partner moved in together. He's fantastic at video games and I enjoy watching him play while providing minimal contributions. So I was in charge of platforming, one thing I'm actually okay at, and he was doing all the bosses. Occasionally I would try a fight or two, but get bored after several unsuccessful attempts and hand over the controller. And that's where this story would end, except, wait a minute, I guess I got obsessed with this game and oops, will you look at that, I've gotten every achievement and done Pantheon 5? This is my one real achievement of 2024. On an unrelated note, about a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I've got my autism diagnosis when I was 18 after doing my own research and finding a specialist who could assess me. I'm also surrounded by ADHD people, both my partner and my best friend have it, and so do many of my acquaintances. Who knows why I didn't notice it in myself, but I'm glad my psychiatrist did. One of my most debilitating symptoms is inability to push through even minor difficulties at times. If I can't do it well on first attempt, I quit altogether. I have little tolerance for frustration and I find it hard to do things without an external motivator, such as fear of negative consequences. Some ADHD people have described this as putting your hand on a hot stove. Physically, nothing is stopping you from touching burning metal with your bare hand, but your brain knows that it will hurt like hell, so you have to fight it tooth and nail. Sure, if someone will put a gun to your head or promise you $1 million, you'll do it, but otherwise it feels antithetical to your survival. For many ADHD people, any boring, tedious task can be a hot stove, but so can be a novel and intimidating task that appears insurmountable in difficulty. Practice is rarely fun, and the reward of practice is delayed or invisible. It can take years of consistent action to develop a skill, and because of how gradual that process is, you might not even notice. From an early age, our environment tends to only reward us for results. Despite the stereotype, there is no participation trophy for practicing math whole year and still failing your final exam. As a child, I never quite learned how to stick with something I wasn't good at, because I was good at everything that was demanded of me. School was easy until it wasn't. The first time I couldn't get something without trying was preparing for final state exams. I had to learn how to learn as a teenager, in high school and in my undergrad. I was driven by my love for biology, and once I moved to Poland on a student visa, the fear of dropping out and being sent back to Russia. Fear of deportation is a fantastic study motivator. Music helped too. When I'm learning a song on drums, sometimes I will repeat the same tiny fragment for an hour or more until I get it just right. Apparently, when I have the motivation, I am incredibly stubborn and resistant to frustration and rage quitting. This is how I play rhythm games as well. I love playing the same level again and again until I get the highest score. My partner has seen me restart the same level in Rift of the Necrodancer 10, 20, 30 times and ask why that was enjoyable for me. I honestly cannot tell. It's practice for the sake of practice. Special interests and hyperfixations are frightening beasts. Hollow Knight is a famously challenging game even for people who grew up with Souls-like and Metroidvanias. My partner has beaten every Dark Souls game, but there came a point where I, who played Pets 5 and Sonic my entire childhood, could do bosses like Nightmare King Grim or Absolute Radiance better than him. Nothing changed about my brain or abilities, it was purely because, for some reason, my brain had decided that Hollow Knight was important and it was worth sinking hundreds of hours into it.
Part 2 on special interests and hyperfixations.
A quick note on the terms special interest and hyperfixation here. Both are used in community to describe intense, often overwhelming obsessions that people with autism and/or ADHD can develop. Special interest is an autistic term and hyperfixation is generally an ADHD term. The first might be a bit less intense but lasts longer. The second is typically short-lived but higher in intensity. I experience both, though special interests are much more common for me than hyperfixations. In my experience, special interests are also viewed more positively. Sure, for some people they are debilitating, but they are also frequently mentioned as advantageous autism traits. Meanwhile, for many of us, ADHD hyperfixations are associated with the cycle of discovering a new interest, diving into it headfirst, buying all necessary equipment and planning out a massive project or even a business, only to suddenly lose all interest. Many ADHD people struggle with their hyperfixation graveyard because they feel like they can never finish anything. Meanwhile, special interest can last for years or decades, maybe even become someone's career. The advice I hear all the time on autism subreddits is turn your special interest into a job, which, well, easier said than done. Anything can be a special interest, a fandom, a language, a real person, a specific object, or random topic. Good luck finding a job if all you care about is bottle caps or Legos. It is possible, but complicated. I always thought that for me it will not be complicated. My longest lasting special interest is biology. I've been interested in sciences since I was a toddler, but what set me on a specific path was a book I read when I was 9. It was my grandmother's book, one she had read in uni, a pop sci title about strange phenomena in biology, limb regeneration, rare parasites, unique ecosystems, and so on. It was outdated and definitely not intended for children, and I loved that book so much I carried it everywhere. I practically memorized some of the chapters and did my start of the year school report on it. I got an A with 2 pluses. The interest steadily grew through middle school and high school. It was obvious to me that I would study biology in university. My mom was the only voice of dissent in my family, suggesting I do literature or journalism instead, since writing was an even bigger, older passion of mine. I chose biology because it appeared a safer bet. Everyone agreed that a STEM degree will guarantee employment and a high salary. And I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be a professor so fucking bad. For my first day in uni, I gave it my absolute all. My first year of undergrad, I only skipped 3 lectures and 2 classes, all because of illness, did every assignment, hit every single deadline, and passed every subject. My average was shit, and I had to retake some exams, but that probably had something to do with the fact that I was studying in a foreign language which I only started learning a year prior. My entire first year, I could barely string a sentence together, and I got through on my existing biology knowledge. I would hear an unfamiliar word in lecture and guess what it meant from context. A large human organ that produces enzymes and handles toxins. Okay, so wątroba means liver. That kind of stuff. I kept my autism and chronic illnesses a secret. I was scared that requesting accommodations would hurt my career prospects. I was raw dogging this degree. No medications, no psychotherapy, no additional support. One time, I went to an 8 a.m. lecture feeling like absolute garbage, kind of fainted while standing up from my seat, and then walked to my next class to ask if I could do it tomorrow with a different group before finally going home. I was told by multiple teachers in school that I'm a lazy piece of shit who is wasting my potential and will never even get into uni, and I wanted to prove them wrong. I did it. I graduated my bachelor's and got highest marks on my thesis. Then I immediately applied for a master's degree and received a scholarship to work on a really cool research project. I graduated the master's with distinction, even though I had to take a semester off because COVID happened and my grandfather died and I really needed a break. After the master's, I went straight to PhD school and also received a very generous scholarship. I was succeeding academically and providing for both myself and my partner, giving him an opportunity to focus on his degree. Everything was great. I proved all of them wrong. I had successfully overcome my disability and turned my longest special interest into a career. Yeah, sure.
Part 3, on burnout, the spiky profile, and total brain failure.
Time to introduce more autism slang. Burnout is a word mostly used in context of occupational burnout. It is not an official diagnosis yet, but it is a real phenomenon that can profoundly affect someone and be as difficult to deal with as depression. Autism burnout is not a diagnosis either, and the research on it is limited. I think we as the autism community messed up a bit with the name because it undersells the severity of the experience. I call it total brain failure or total brain collapse. Apart from typical exhaustion and depression symptoms, autism burnout causes a rapid regression in skill. When I hit total brain collapse, it bumped me down from low support needs to medium. I needed help with every household task and struggled with personal hygiene. I had limited verbal communication and spent a lot of time hidden under a blanket, only able to text with my partner and play simple games on my phone. I slept for 12 or more hours a night and needed multiple daytime naps on top of that. Everything felt like an unbelievably difficult task, even something as simple as getting myself a glass of water or brushing my teeth. This was not my first burnout, but it was the worst. I'm not sure what exactly caused it. I think it was a combination of many things. Beginning of my second year of PhD, I had a kidney infection that happened out of nowhere. I had zero symptoms in the morning, and in the afternoon I was in the emergency room. I got excellent care and left with antibiotics, which fixed the issue in a few days. Still, it was incredibly stressful and massively set me back with work. It became the first domino out of many. I was already exhausted and overwhelmed by then. I was teaching for 6 hours a week while attending classes myself, working on a meta-analysis, and learning skills required for my research. I struggled with balancing my tasks and my anxiety was worsening. Soon after the infection, my OCD was flaring like it hadn't in years. Then I developed weird physical symptoms. I should mention that transitioning and taking testosterone has surprisingly made my chronic illness much easier to deal with, and I hadn't had a flare since my undergrad. Several months later, I discovered it was a new issue: hyperthyroidism caused by a benign thyroid nodule. Anyone who ever had hyperthyroidism knows how much it sucks, especially when you already have anxiety. By the point I started antithyroid medication and had nodule removal scheduled, the burnout was in full swing. I took an unofficial break from the PhD. There is no formal procedure for medical leave in my program, so I needed every teacher to agree to it personally, and try to focus on recovery. The year between September 2023 and October 2024 were the worst 12 months of my life. My partner and parents had to take care of me, and I am forever grateful for that. My PhD supervisor and everyone else at my university were on my side as well, trying everything to keep me in the program. But because there was no option to pause some of the steps required for me to progress in the PhD, eventually I had to quit. Honestly, I'm not sure I would have made it to the end even if all of that didn't happen. I think I would burn out eventually anyway, maybe a bit later, maybe much later. I understand now that for me, a full-time job is undoable. Remember Hollow Knight? That game was one of the only things I could do while burned out. I beat Pantheon 5 while reliant on my partner for every little task. Another autism term for you: spiky profile. If we imagine the skills, traits, and deficits of an autistic person as a color wheel, a more apt visual metaphor than a linear spectrum, we can map every individual combination as a shape, a profile. A spiky profile describes a person with a significantly higher skill levels in some areas, contrasted with lower skill levels in others. So-called savants are the extreme version, individuals with extensive care needs who excel at math, music, or other valued pursuits. Savants are rare though. Most spiky profile people are the current or former twice exceptional students who simultaneously require support and are praised as gifted. The tasks I find difficult or simple don't seem to follow any common pattern. When I was already struggling to make myself a sandwich, I was still teaching. I couldn't imagine letting down my students and putting the work on someone else. So I would get dressed, walk to campus, and lead a 3-hour-long class on coding and statistics, then come back home, collapse in a heap of exhaustion, and not say a word for the rest of that day. I would just sit silently in front of the computer playing Hollow Knight till I couldn't stay awake anymore. My brain was able to teach R code, but not provide itself basic nutrition.
Part 4. Perseverance, Determination, Failure.
Perseverance is a trait I would never ascribe to myself. I'm the kind of person who dismisses any achievement with, well, if I could do it, then it must be easy. Every person in my family and circle of friends has agreed that I didn't fail at the PhD, the system failed me. And technically, they are correct. If I had the opportunity to take that medical leave and do the program in 6 years instead of 4, sure, maybe I would have finished it. It would have been pointless anyway, since scientific careers are not disability friendly in the slightest. I don't know if part-time postdoc positions even exist. So I think it is perfectly reasonable to say that I failed at both the degree and the career as a whole. I will never be a professor, and I must learn to live with that. Of course, the concept of perseverance necessarily includes failure. You fail repeatedly, but you get up, move on, and try again. This is a common feature of many video games, and not only in my beloved Hollow Knight. Determination is a repeated motif in Undertale, relentless failure is expected in any Souls-like, and it is the main gameplay element of roguelikes. Some of my favorite games like Hades and Balatro require you to lose over and over again to progress. Inscription, which I never finished but love watching videos about, pushes you incessantly to keep trying even after winning. There are games that are actively hostile to the player, like Pathologic or to some extent Stanley Parable. Pathologic is a game often brought up in discussions about whether video games need to be fun to play. Stanley Parable straight up makes fun of you for trying to play it, and especially in the deluxe edition. And then, well, then there's Disco Elysium. Disco Elysium is a divorced suicidal alcoholic simulator pretending to be an RPG. It feels bad to play Disco Elysium, especially at the beginning, the part where the developers are supposed to be persuading you to keep playing. Harry Dubois is the opposite of a wish fulfillment protagonist, and your first in-game day is filled with repeated failure. It's not surprising that this universally critically acclaimed game has these kinds of reviews.
I just got a game over on a skill check, and the last autosave was like 2 hours ago. No thanks.
I went up to two old men, tried to do a check with a 97% pass chance, rolled a critical fail, my character got depressed, gave up on life and the game ended. And my last autosave was back at the start of the game. No, that's just not okay.
It's boring, dull, and mostly a text-reading game. Don't understand all the hype.
All the kids in the game won't stop calling me a fat.
None of the positive reviews of this game say the word fun for a reason. If you play games to have fun, think twice before playing. Back in my day, I am 32, games were like, what if you were a taxi driver and you had to drive real fast? Oh, how the times have changed. You don't even drive a single taxi in this game. Probably.
7 thumbs down. I've been playing this game for 5 entire minutes and not one single person has exploded. I haven't even chainsawed someone in half or anything. Half the screen is covered in letters. I'm gonna go play Doom.
Too French.
And yeah, I agree that it can be a struggle to get through, especially in the first few hours. But it is also one of my favorite games of all times, and one of my favorite pieces of art in general. One of the main game mechanics in Disco Elysium is rolling dice checks. Regardless of how you set up the character, you will fail at a lot of these checks. Again, and again, and again. At the same time, you're not only allowed, but encouraged to try them later. Just like Metroidvanias use repeated failure to incentivize the player to explore other areas and come back with new abilities, Disco Elysium pushes you to explore the world and engage with the broader story. You can't solely focus on solving the murder, you have to walk around and get involved. This ties the mechanics of the game to its philosophy and deeper themes. The political views of the original creators are not a secret. They openly thank Karl Marx in one of their acceptance speeches. At the same time, they are very critical of communism and make fun of both the ideology and supporters of communism. The actual text of Disco Elysium contains the words, "Communism is about failure. Complete, utter, catastrophic failure." They are not subtle.
Wait, first, what's this communism even about?
Failure. It's about failure.
Failure?
Yes, abject failure. Total, irreversible defeat on all fronts. Absolutely vanquished. beaten, curb stomped and pissed on. Until you came along. You will reverse the fortune of the workers of the world.
The creators of this Coliseum are from Estonia, a country that was occupied by the USSR until 1991. I was born in Russia and I am now a citizen of Poland, both of which are post-Soviet/post-communist countries. I grew up thinking that being a socialist was an offense and an insult to anyone who suffered under the Soviet regime. It seemed obvious that the experiment was done. Communism was attempted and it failed, and now we can never try it again, knowing how terrible the consequences can be. I do not believe this anymore, but I do cringe sometimes at people outside of Eastern or Central Europe romanticizing USSR. It's not that USSR achieved nothing worth acknowledging or recreating, rather I feel like people who actually experienced life in USSR, even if briefly, are sometimes better positioned to support the idea of communism and explain why is it worth trying even if we will continue to fail. I sometimes feel like a failure in terms of my nationality too. I don't consider myself ethnically Russian and I'm not sure I ever did. My ethnicity is complicated. When asked, I usually answer jokingly that I am a Soviet salad. I have roots from all over USSR and Eastern Europe, including Poland, Armenia, Belarus, Ukraine and Russia. My paternal grandfather is Jewish, and if it wasn't for his reasonable fear of discrimination, both my dad and me would have had a Jewish surname in our passports. I do not feel Polish either. I've been living here for almost a decade, I have the citizenship, I speak the language, I embrace the culture, and I try my best to keep track of what is going on, both in the country as a whole and in my city. I vote in elections, I go to protests, I fill every citizen opinion survey I come across. I still feel like I will never truly belong here, no matter how hard I try. I am not planning on leaving, even if many of my peers are seriously considering it. Poland is doing much better than Russia in every possible way. Actually, it's doing better than many countries in Europe. The economy is still rapidly developing, the cities are growing, and despite somewhat stagnant politics, some good changes do happen. On the other hand, this is one of the most homophobic countries in the entire European Union, and I am both gay and trans. On yet another third hand, back in Russia, the LGBT community is officially considered a terrorist organization, so I feel weird complaining. At least I have consistent access to hormone replacement therapy. Some people in the USA and the UK cannot even say that. It would be easy to give up utterly, to stop hoping for something better altogether. Russia is beyond saving. I think it's a totalitarian fascist dictatorship openly committing and celebrating war crimes. Poland, well, it's complicated. Power changes hands every election, but it makes little difference to people's lives. Politicians love promises, but they have little incentive to stick to their words when the voters are too scared to vote for anything else. Disillusioned with meaningless wins within the system, many people of my age yearn for a radical change. A collapse, a revolution, maybe even an apocalypse. The allure of doomerism is strong, and it can be paradoxically comforting to imagine a barren wasteland that you will somehow survive, or not, rather than a steady, gradual change. It's easier to imagine the end of the world, etc., etc. I don't think hope requires optimism. Arguably, you only need hope when you have no cause for optimism. But constantly building up hope as a motivation for action and then being disappointed again and again can lead to utter despair. Activist burnout is another kind of burnout increasingly discussed, and it doesn't only affect dedicated activists. Everyone with a lick of social media use is bombarded daily with a kaleidoscope of catastrophe. For those left of center, the world presented to us appears on the brink of collapse, and I won't argue that this is entirely an artifact of increased awareness and negativity bias. Genocide, climate change, mass deportations, failing democracies, government spending cuts, merciless attacks on queer and trans rights. These are not abstractions for many people. Their world is ending, their lives and safety are endangered. Sure, witnessing these horrors every day is not great for our brains, but neither is fascism and the climate crisis. I know there must be a, well, maybe healthy is a wrong word to use, but let's say a more manageable middle ground between staying informed 24/7 and throwing your phone into the nearest body of water. Sometimes it feels like spreading the word and educating yourself is the only way you can contribute, especially when you have no time or energy or financial means to contribute otherwise. Occasionally I catch myself continuing to engage with distressing news despite already knowing more than enough, just to punish myself for not being able to do more. As if me experiencing negative emotions will somehow tip the scale of justice, reducing the stark discrepancy in our suffering. In reality, being a perpetual witness to horrors desensitizes people more than it motivates them. Even when efforts are rapidly mobilized for action due to social media coverage, burnout soon follows when those efforts yield anything less than a decisive victory. Faced with unimaginable suffering, we understandably demand absolute liberation. And if we feel like that absolute liberation is impossible, we might give up on trying to achieve anything else. Research shows that small individual stories elicit more empathy than horrifying statistics. It's called identified victim effect. People donate more money when presented with a story of one specific person in need rather than a general report outlining the actual scale of the problem. I wonder if we should reverse it to reduce activist burnout. Rather than focusing on our failures, continue to highlight the individuals who we are able to save. For example, we might not prevent the tipping point of climate change, but it doesn't mean that our efforts to curb it as much as possible are meaningless. Every tenth of a degree, even beyond that tipping point, still matters. We might be past the save everyone line, but we will never be past save at least someone line.
Someone, please. Not the whole town. Just save someone.
Still, I understand why avoiding despair is so challenging. Doomerism is comforting, and humans are already not optimized for happiness. Evolutionary psychology is bogus like 95% of the time, but I do think it's reasonable to say that consistent happiness and high life satisfaction is not a trait that natural selection would be likely to promote. An animal that continuously strives for more is bound to outperform one that is happy with less. The idea of the hedonic treadmill and genetically determined happiness set points is criticized, but it is probably true that perpetual happiness is rare. Being content or comfortable and having purpose is more important, though maybe just as hard to achieve. This brings us back to perseverance, since a vital part of happiness and purpose is the ability to keep going. In psychology, grit is defined as a combination of persistent effort and sustained interest in a specific goal. Put simply, it is both the ability to keep going and the strength of your passion that compels you to keep going. I learned about it from a Substack article about failure, where it was introduced as a trait most correlated with the probability of success. A quick search reveals that grit is also highly correlated with measures of subjective well-being and life satisfaction. If at first you don't succeed, try again seems to be true both for actual success and for overall happiness. A common critique of this concept is that grit is not distinct from conscientiousness, a core personality trait that every job ad wants you to have. In short, conscientious people are responsible, hardworking, organized, disciplined, etc. It would therefore make sense that they would put more consistent effort into achieving their goals, leading to the aforementioned positive outcomes. Additionally, one meta-analysis found that only one component of grit, the persistent effort, correlates with success and happiness, and sustained interest doesn't particularly affect anything. Without a good psychological background, it's hard to say who is right. Research seems to be mixed, and for me, the main distinction between conscientiousness and grit appears a bit semantic. One describes who you are, and the other what you tend to do. I don't believe in willpower, laziness, or free will in general, so I am ready to accept that these are distinctions without a difference. It rather reminds me about the marshmallow studies, which found correlation between the ability of children to delay gratification and future positive outcomes. Self-control and willpower were therefore proclaimed as one of the most important skills/character traits to develop in children. Years later, it turned out that many of the children seemingly unwilling to wait for the second marshmallow came from disadvantaged families. They didn't believe that the second marshmallow was coming, so of course it made sense to eat the first one immediately. The results of the marshmallow tests were therefore a third correlate. Success on the test and future life success were associated with the socioeconomic background, the likely real cause of both. Remember this, I will come back to it. I will now admit that reading about grit made me a bit emotional. Firstly, because people with neurodevelopmental disorders, especially ADHD, consistently score lower on conscientiousness. Secondly, because inability to keep trying is precisely what I've struggled with my whole life and what I've been told over and over to work on. But to what extent can you work on it without therapy, without medication, without any support? We know that executive functioning is impaired in ADHD and autistic brains, and we know that it responds to medication, guided exercises, and even cognitive behavioral therapy. I know from personal experience that 5 milligrams of controlled-release methylphenidate magically makes me more willing to persist on a difficult task. But I doubt these deficits respond to just being told to get better at it, especially when you're 7 years old. Also, separate question, is it always worth to keep going? Is it true that the only way to fail is to give up trying? Where is the line between dedication, hope, optimism, grit, and just being delusional or wasting your time?
Part 5. Querying sucks.
A widely shared statistic in and out of writer circles proclaims that only 3% of people who start writing a novel ever finish. I've tried my best to find a source for it, by the way, and found nothing. Still, regardless of the precise number, I think it is self-evident that only a small fraction of people who have ever expressed the desire to write a book end up actually doing it. This is why at the very start of the publishing process, you will hear that you've already succeeded, you've already done the hard part. I've finished my first original novel, a 185,000 word monstrosity of a space opera buried in the depths of my old hard drives, when I was either 19 or 20. I don't remember and I can't be bothered to check. Point is, writing a novel was never the hard part for me. I can bang out 100,000 words in 2 months if I get obsessed enough. The hard part was always getting someone to actually read it. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the publishing industry, so I will direct you to some other videos like that of Lindsay Ellis. What I do want to talk about is the never give up mindset, present specifically among writers who want to be traditionally published. Anyone with internet access can become an author in 3 clicks, and that is wonderful. I've read many fantastic self-published books that aren't even on Amazon. This is not what I wanted for myself though, when I started querying in 2020. Partially because I had zero money to put into that project and I wanted my book professionally edited, partially because I craved the validation of a literary agent picking me out of thousands of other writers querying them. I was at the point in life when I believed 2 things. 1, my self-worth and confidence would improve dramatically if I would get traditionally published, and 2, getting published was something I could win. by doing everything right and not giving up. If you thought that fake 3% stat was surprising, oh boy do I have news for you. Traditional publishing is a funnel of filters that is akin to winning a small jackpot in a lottery, especially if you define success as selling enough copies to launch a writing career that will provide at least a part-time income. First, you need to find an agent. This already filters out 90 to 99% of authors, since there are tens of thousands of people sending query letters and maybe a couple hundred agents that take maybe 5 to 10 new clients a year. Then the agent pitches the book to editors, and there are even fewer of those. If none of them picks up your book, your agent might just drop you as well. Not because the agent is a bad person, but because they have families to feed just as you do, and they cannot keep on every client. If the editor bites, they submit the book to the publisher. Plenty of books die on submission. If the publisher decides to publish you, the book needs to sell well. Most books do not earn out their advances, which means the publisher typically loses money on publishing debuts. And once you are no longer a debut, your chances of getting published actually decrease. Now you have a selling history, and big publishers are always chasing their next big thing. Basically, your chances of becoming a professional writer this way are about as high as getting a solid online following. It's just this route seemed to me more dependent on merit. Keyword seemed. I did get published, by the way. It was my second original novel and it came out in August of 2024. Agents ignored me completely, but multiple small presses requested my full manuscript and one ended up offering. Over a year since its release, I've sold less than 100 copies. I didn't expect much, to be honest. My publisher is a small independent press focused on queer literature, and my book is a philosophical space opera with an unlikable autistic protagonist. Neither me nor the publisher had the resources to advertise and market widely, and I have barely any online audience. When looking back on the whole process, I don't regret putting all the time and effort into writing and editing. At the end of the day, your primary motivation for writing should always be because I want to. I wanted to tell the story and I did. I also don't regret going with a publisher that shared my vision and didn't ask me to change the book to make it more marketable or broadly appealing. I do regret querying agents rather than focusing on small presses from the get-go. Despite the aforementioned astronomical odds, thousands of people continue querying their books. It is true that few people succeed on their first attempt. Many currently popular professional writers spend years querying one novel after another with little to no success. As people like to repeat, it only takes one yes. In reality, it takes a rather large number of yeses, but that's beside the point. The people who do succeed are the ones who did not give up, who had the grit and the perseverance to keep trying. The issue is, that doesn't mean the remaining vast majority did not. Grit may be a predictor of success in a sense that most of the people who do succeed tend to have a lot of it. The reverse is not necessarily true. Most of the people who have plenty of grit do not succeed at everything they try to achieve. Some goals are just inherently less achievable than others. I think the general pattern is to overestimate our ability to control the outcome and underestimate the number of factors that influence that outcome. Factors that are either random or outside of our control. I also think it is easy to forget that sustained effort that leads nowhere is not benign, even if we didn't sink any money into the project. Failure often comes at a great cost, especially if your resources are limited to begin with or your living situation is precarious. Another psychological concept mentioned in that Substack essay on failure is regulatory focus theory. It is a framework that explains how a person's motivation interacts with their method of pursuing set goals. The two main motivations in this framework are prevention and promotion. The latter focuses on gaining something new or achieving a positive outcome. The former is the opposite. It is focused on avoiding a negative outcome and minimizing loss. Unsurprisingly, prevention focus is more common in people from disadvantaged backgrounds. It's not that they are less ambitious, they just have more at stake. They suffer more when they fail. Querying doesn't cost any money. Actually, the main benefit of traditional publishing is you don't have to spend a dime on it. Money only ever flows to the author. However, the time you spend perfecting the query letter, researching literary agents, personalizing the opening lines, and tracking your stats is not trivial. And the emotional impact of handling dozens, if not hundreds, of rejections is profound. If you believe that validation from the gatekeepers or from the readers will improve your self-esteem, then the reverse is also true. You can't have one without the other. You might think this is a silly heartbreak to experience. After all, no one is entitled to have their book published, and I just said like 5 minutes ago that I wrote it because I wanted to. The context you're missing is that I've been writing since I was a toddler, and it's one of the very few skills I am actually confident in. To some extent at least. I am disabled. I have deficits, I know I suck at so many things, and there were always two career paths I could envision for myself. Academia or writing. And, well, wouldn't you know it, I failed at both.
Part 6. The real cost of failure.
In a vacuum, fear of failure can appear as an entirely psychological dilemma. We try to minimize the negative outcomes associated with failure, the hit to our self-esteem, the judgment of others, the waste of our time, but we have to balance it with grit and resilience to pursue and achieve meaningful goals that are vital to our well-being. In theory, yes, I would only fail at being a writer if I would stop writing. Or die. That's a thing no one ever talks about in querying circles, by the way. You won't live forever, and it's technically possible to query book after book forever until you die of old age. But that's abstract. That's far away and almost silly to even consider. A much more prescient thing to weigh is, what if I burn out from spending all my free time on querying and won't be able to do my job? You know, the thing that pays me money, that I need to buy food, to like, stay alive? When you ask almost any querying writer why they are doing it, one of the reasons they give is wanting to make money off of their books. It's not a "I want to be rich" motivation. If you've done your research on the publishing industry, you probably know that the average professional full-time writer makes about as much money as a Walmart employee, if not less. Both work hard, both are ridiculously underpaid. This is why the AI bros trying to pump out ChatGPT novels astonish me. Out of anything you can do as a job, being a fiction writer is about as far away from a get-rich-quick scheme as you can get. The reason writers want to make money off of writing is because they want to spend more time doing it. So many How I Got My Agent stories feature descriptions of vigorous typing at 2 AM in between putting your kids to bed and leaving for your morning work shift. It is true that many people who manage to become professional creatives are supported by family, before, during, and even after their breakout success. That doesn't mean they don't work ridiculously hard as well, and many have no support network at all. I don't want to be rich and famous either. Really, I just want to stay afloat and ideally give back to my parents and grandparents who have already put so much into raising me and continue to support me in every way possible. I am very grateful for them, but I'm also aware that their resources are not limitless. I would prefer to not completely depend on my partner either, not because I don't trust him, but because I don't want to put him in a position where he can't quit a horrible job or take a health break because I have no income. What if I won't have money to live is a legitimate, deep-rooted fear that permeates our society and affects everything and everyone. It's not just the obvious things, the toll it takes on people's mental and physical health, and the cost to the healthcare system associated with it, the stagnation of innovation caused by less risk-taking, the time people are unable to spend on raising their children or volunteering or pursuing art and education. it also harms vital societal structures. In science, researchers are afraid of failure in the form of not getting their study published. Their salaries and their ability to do their job depend on their publication numbers, and their publication numbers depend on their ability to produce research that the journals consider interesting. Some purposefully avoid testing ideas that are likely to produce null results because journals are less willing to accept them. And then we are somehow surprised that we are in a replication crisis. Workers scared of losing their jobs do not criticize their managers or bosses. They do not unionize, they don't argue about OSHA violations, they do not strike or quit their jobs when their company does something morally abhorrent. Students who are terrified of making a mistake do not pick up challenging material or admit to not understanding something in class. Citizens afraid of losing their means of sustenance do not get involved in politics. Some are too tired to even inform themselves on presidential candidates or show up to the voting booth. We aren't just afraid of failure, we're afraid of the failure putting us in danger. Danger of social rejection, of nervous breakdown, of losing our sources of income. Remember that marshmallow experiment? Doesn't it make sense that just as a lack of hope in the future can affect your supposed willpower, a lack of security in the present can affect your motivation and ability to keep going despite failure? Isn't it possible that both grit and subjective well-being correlate with something else, like a happy childhood or a supportive background? It's not easy to persevere when you have so much at stake.
Part 7. Learned helplessness.
I don't want to be a doomer or to exaggerate. I know that many people recover from the deepest rock bottom black holes imaginable, that not all governments are negligent and evil, and that communities often step in to help when they are. I think it's important to both acknowledge that failure can ruin people's lives and that hope still exists. As long as someone is alive, things can always get better. I've hit my own personal rock bottom a few times, and I always get out of it eventually. If you are still breathing, no matter how hopeless it seems, it's not over yet. There are people who care, and change is possible. At the same time, it's worth thinking about what happens if failure never stops, and what follows the recovery. Learned helplessness is another psychological concept I thought about often during my year of reversing total brain failure. It was discovered in the 1960s during experiments that I'd rather not describe because I don't want to talk about puppies being hurt in an already somewhat depressing video. I'll link some sources in my notes. The basic idea is that repeated failure can shift your understanding from I'm in control and I can stop myself from suffering to I cannot prevent this suffering, so I should preserve my energy instead. It is one of the possible mechanisms of depression and other mental illnesses like social anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorders. My personal hypothesis is that there is a learned helplessness component to autistic burnout as well. If giving up is about preserving energy, shutting down the brain can be a reasonable response to being constantly pushed beyond breaking point. Learned helplessness can be unlearned, though it takes time, effort, and often external help in the form of therapy and medication. It is not a guarantee though, and total recovery from autistic burnout is not certain either. Dr. Devon Price's essay, You May Never Recover from Autistic Burnout, outlines why it might be more psychologically healthy to accept that you will never gain back 100% of lost skills. I suspect this is true for me, though I also suspect I never truly had those abilities to begin with. It's like constantly borrowing money without ever paying anything back. That pace of life was unsustainable for me. It's not a natural ability if it ends up hurting me in the long term. Learned helplessness can happen on a collective level as well. Whole societies can lose momentum and will to action because of a genuine or perceived lack of control. I say perceived because sometimes big wins do happen and some social movements do succeed. The issue is, these wins are never permanent. They have to be maintained your entire life, an endless, seemingly Sisyphean task, a fight against thermodynamics. America had abortion rights, until it didn't. Marginalized people can never relax even after we secure new freedoms, because there will always be people patiently waiting to take those freedoms away. Strangely, I feel similar about taking care of my body and my brain. I have recovered from the latest burnout, but now I must stay vigilant to prevent a future one. I can put all possible effort into managing my symptoms and staying as healthy as possible. I can do everything right, eat well, exercise, sleep 8 hours a day, and even avoid stress somehow. I will still age and die. My apartment will still get dirty, no matter how thoroughly I clean it. Our bodies are forever losing homeostasis, and we're forever preventing our own decay. Basically, life is a never-ending cycle of having to decide what you will have for dinner. And yes, before you say anything, I'm just as existentialism-pilled as any leftist video essayist. I'm trying to imagine that fucking cunt happy all the damn time. I imagine it especially vividly when, after hours of effort, I finish a Hollow Knight rando, screenshot my time and percent completion to send it to my partner, and then immediately delete it and start a new one from scratch. I am an advocate of romanticizing washing the dishes and pursuing goals for the sake of pursuing goals. But I mean, you have to admit, even when every single goal you set for yourself is ultimately achieved, it is still kind of a never-ending loop, isn't it? No one ever says, ah yes, I have achieved this goal I have spent years working towards, and now I feel awesome and I will always feel awesome and will never need to achieve anything ever again. Best case scenario, you will ride the wave of achievement for a little bit and then you'll have to set new goals because not having any goals is boring. Typical case scenario, achieving the goal doesn't even feel as good as you thought it would. It is also a well-known phenomenon in psychology that the anticipation of reward is usually more satisfying than the reward itself. Even when listening to music, our satisfaction rises before the good part and not during the good part. Some people even feel worse after achieving a goal. I suspect this is one of the reasons some trans people get depressed after gender-affirming surgery. You spend years trying to reach the goal and then you finally do, and yes, you're happier, you feel and look more like yourself, but also you're tired and in pain and having to take it easy, while all of your other problems are still there and there's probably still something you're dysphoric about. So the mood goes down. Makes total sense. Eventually, and we know this from research, life satisfaction does increase because of gender-affirming surgeries. It just takes a little bit of time. To some, failing and giving up entirely can even be a positive experience. In tarot, the star comes after the tower because hope can arise from destruction and disaster. Sometimes failing can free you from relentlessly pursuing something you didn't even want anymore, or be an opportunity to start over and try something new. We usually perceive periods of slowness and decreased creative output as signs of stress or depression, but they don't have to be related. Maybe a couple months of writer's block is what you needed to figure out that plot hole. You can even have a little bit of bed rotting every once in a while, as a treat. The quiet quitting, the I don't dream of labor, the seeming apathy of young people are seen as symptoms of societal malaise. I'm not saying these are unrelated phenomena. I agree that there is little motivation to build a career or put in 150% at work when you know that you won't get promoted or buy a house anyway. However, we can also see this as necessary course correction. Our economies cannot keep growing because we do not live on a planet with infinite resources. This relentless pursuit of progress has already put us on the brink of climate collapse. Sure, people are quite quitting because they hate their job, but maybe everyone should do the same? Maybe we need to slow down. Burnout, total brain failure, is not just the result of reaching your breaking point. Becoming a failure is also how you heal from it, and how you prevent it in the future.
Part 8, Sunrise, Parabellum.
Before long, a modest tower begins to rise from the pile of matchboxes. You place every box with the utmost delicacy and precision.
Easy, Uli. It's holding. It's holding.
For the moment. The higher the tower goes, the quieter the room seems to become. Aside from the occasional comment, the three of you are completely absorbed by the task.
All right, you go next, Stepan.
The young man pushes back his shirt sleeves, revealing the pale flesh of his forearms.
Is it? He's holding. He's holding. Yes, this is the closest we've ever gotten.
In 2024, I failed at everything. My body gave up, my book launch went to hell, I abandoned YouTube and all of my writing projects, quit the PhD program, disappeared from the internet and lost all ambition and motivation. I had to spend a year just being a vegetable. I was not contributing to society in the slightest, and I was actively taking resources from other people. Sure, I was living off of my savings, and sure, everyone in my family said that my job was to recover, but for a long time, it felt like I wasn't recovering at all. I was just there, motionless, static, maybe even rotting. I wonder if I've gotten into eco-fungal botanical horror so much since then is because I identify with the rot, the decay, the devouring of these horrors. For an individual organism, death is a failure, but in an ecosystem, death is a kind of victory, not just of thermodynamics, but of the countless organisms that depend on death. Most fungi survive by feeding on death, transforming dead matter. A dead whale can provide sustenance to an entire ecosystem for years. I have always been drawn to abandoned buildings, especially ones grown over by vegetation. Some photos of modern-day Chernobyl are strangely beautiful to me. They represent a confirmation that, while a great tragedy struck and thousands of people suffered, nature did not give up on this place. Did you know that there is a fungus that can feed on radiation? By consuming, devouring, reclaiming, it might one day make Pripyat livable for humans again. The fungus was there before the disaster, mind you. It happened to have acquired, through random mutation, this ability in a place where it later became advantageous. What was initially useless became vital, not because the fungus changed, but because the environment did. A great reminder that value is greatly dependent on its context.
Hey cunts, so a bottle of water will cost you 50 cents at the supermarket, $2 at the gym, $3 at the fucking movies, or $6 on a fucking plane, cunts. It's the same fucking bottle of water, same fucking water, nothing's fucking changed. The only thing that's changed its value is its fucking location, cunts. So next time you're feeling you've got no fucking self-worth, maybe you need to change your location, cunts.
So, despite how terrible it made me feel, I allowed myself to just be. It never stopped being embarrassing and shameful, but I had no other choice. I was forced to slow down because I refused to do it before. As some people say, if you won't slow down, your body will slow down for you. Eventually I began recovering from burnout, but I may never get back all the skills I lost. I sure as hell will never be the person that my entire family and me personally imagined me to be. As usual, people around me were more accepting than I anticipated, same as when I failed at being a woman, my words, not theirs, and transitioned to male. They were just happy that I was starting to feel better. I am coming to terms with the fact that the person I imagined is an unachievable goal. Like I've said already, if living like that consistently causes me total brain failure, it is not a realistic goal. I do not allow myself the what-ifs about academia. The actual material reality is that my brain and body are incompatible with it. If the system will ever change, then I can exercise my imagination. A couple of months ago, after years of persuading myself that I'd rather keep it a secret and pull myself up by my bootstraps, I finally applied for disability. I was recently informed that I need to get additional tests, which I have to do out of pocket, so that's fun, but hopefully it will end well. I also found medication that works pretty well, and it made my life so much lighter and more enjoyable. I am still failing at stuff as we speak. This year I repeatedly failed at finding a job. I'm still trying, but it looks like my only perspective for now is to keep helping my partner and parents with whatever they do and rely on their income. Maybe I will get some disability support, maybe not. Either case, I have learned that it is more expensive to pay for all the healthcare I need to recover from burnout than simply not having a job and putting my efforts into meticulously budgeting everything and surviving on my partner's and family's generosity. If it wasn't for the privilege of having financial and general support from my family, I'd probably be institutionalized or homeless. This is the reality of being disabled, even in a country that an average US politician would call communist because of the range of our social services. Week by week, month by month, I am gaining back energy, strength, and confidence. I got back into writing, I picked up the aforementioned crafty hobbies, started learning another language, reading more, and even going out and meeting new people. The new people in question are friends of my partner and best friend, but still, progress. I've had an on and off relationship with writing my entire life. I regularly give up forever on it and then crawl back into its arms like it is my toxic ex-lover. Many famous authors and creators in general have said that they hate writing and only do it because the only thing worse than making a video is not making a video. I don't think that we actually hate the writing. I think we hate the gap between our perception of the finished product in our heads and whatever it is that we are able to put on the page. I am learning that I have always loved writing, but I hate reading it back. The tug of war between wanting to share it and not wanting to touch that first draft ever again is the reason I keep quitting and coming back. I write because I want to express and communicate, I want my words to be perceived, but I also hate being perceived and hate any kind of marketing and self-promotion. Every check out my stuff post I've ever made felt forced and insincere, and I cannot reconcile the desire to be seen with the desire to A. not be aware of the gap, B. not advertise myself, C. not feel the disappointment of shouting into the void and putting hundreds of hours into polishing a novel just to sell less than 100 copies. I know that what I am missing is community, but the combo of the current world and my disabilities make finding that community seem impossible. So I may go back and forth between abandoning first drafts and preparing them for publication for the rest of my life. Who knows? I certainly don't. YouTube feels especially painful to come back to because I don't just feel disappointed, I feel guilty. Fuck the algorithm put actual effort into getting people's eyes on my work. The wonderful Neely and Sarah of the Leftist Cooks, who are my favorite video essayists by the way, seemed like they genuinely enjoyed my work and were super supportive. And there are people who watched and commented on my videos who also seemed to find them meaningful and important, and who were looking forward to some of the projects I announced. I feel like I didn't just give up, I let all those people down. I was not grateful enough for their support and I failed to pay them back for that support by continuing to put effort into the videos. I didn't have that grit that I've just spent probably over an hour yapping about, and that felt like a betrayal of my own ideas and an act of disrespect to my tiny but real audience. Now, don't get me wrong, I still adore video essay as a medium and I would love to continue creating them. I have endless ideas and multiple whole-ass finished scripts, some as long as 10,000 words, just sitting on my desktop untouched. My main issue is the gap between what I envision and what I can achieve is so enormous, not even methylphenidate can get me to bridge it. I love the researching, the writing, even the editing of the script. I actually really enjoy sitting in front of the camera and talking for 5 hours straight part of the process, which I think is pretty rare. I also feel like I am okay at those parts, good enough to get over the perfectionism and share the result. The parts I unbelievably suck at are everything else. Camera, lighting, sound correction, set design, makeup, costume, editing. I love the big, flashy, elaborate video essays, ones that have a ton of visuals, music, animations, cool sets, and so on. But I do not have the energy, the talent, the skill, or the budget to achieve it. For a long time, I felt like if I can't achieve that vision, it is not worth doing any kind of video essay. For me, what is special about this medium is that all of those elements matter and all are necessary to execute the full vision. I do watch plenty of video essays that are minimally edited, that feature a single person filming themselves in their bedroom talking to a camera, but I always wanted something different for myself. I know that if a hyperfixation would strike, I could learn decent video editing or camera work or anything else. I could probably even manage to save up enough money for a good camera and other equipment. The issue is, I cannot control my hyperfixations, and with every video I've ever made or tried to make, I always dreaded the setup and the video editing so much that the process of acquiring and preparing raw footage felt like a continuous hand on the stove situation. That was the unsustainable part, and it still is. I either need to magically induce that hyperfixation, or just as magically earn enough money to hire a professional editor. And it is beyond frustrating because it is the most pronounced case of me being unable to execute a vision I so clearly have just because of a technical barrier. It is literally a skill issue. I did not know how to reconcile it until recently when I watched a video about AI art by Hello Future Me, in which he talked about AI creators. The one moment that baffled me the most was the comment in one of those communities, someone talking about how AI has allowed them to decouple plot from prose, which for them is a good thing because obviously plot is the only thing that matters. As a reader who primarily enjoys the prose and could read a 500-page book about wall paint drying, I was astonished by this assertion. I thought it was a universal truth in writing communities that ideas are a dime a dozen and execution makes or breaks every concept. Prose does not get in the way of telling a story because it is the story. More than that, I cannot comprehend why you would outsource something that you do not care about to ChatGPT when you could simply not do it. There are plenty of thriving communities that share writing prompts, comment on them, riff off of them, etc., often without writing out the prompt into a full story. Tumblr and even AO3 have an abundance of posts that share concepts or imagines that never become full fics. Some people share longer posts consisting of bullet points, plot summaries, and people read them, share them, and enjoy them. Because of the internet, there is an audience for literally anything. Another recent video I loved is Super Eyepatched Wolf's second installment of fake video games, which is a fascinating concept and a rapidly developing, exciting medium. These are people that either cannot or do not want to code the whole project, but instead of outsourcing the work, they are doing the parts they care about more, and are creating amazing pieces of art. So, if you only care about the plot, both as a reader and a writer, what is the point of generating the prose with the plagiarism machine? Why not just write the plot? Or share writing prompts. It gives the vibe of fluffing up a simple email like "please send me the file by tomorrow afternoon" into a 2-paragraph text full of small talk that you clearly do not care about. If you did, you would write it yourself. For the other person to paste those 2 paragraphs into ChatGPT to summarize it and extract the "send me the file by tomorrow afternoon" message. The LLM is not filling in a gap or optimizing a process. It is actually eating up additional time, electricity, and subscription money to solve a non-existing problem. This is not new, obviously. I've been seeing advice about these situations for ages. Every now and then I come across stories that are so focused on world building, I immediately think, you should try writing wikis and world building bibles. I think you would really enjoy that. I don't know why people feel the need to force their creation into a different medium. Maybe they think that people only read novels, not pages upon pages of world building, but now that there are multiple examples of thriving fandoms that entirely consist of wikis, like SCP for example, I cannot understand why you would force yourself to do anything you don't enjoy just for the sake of a finished product. Primarily. Editing Matthew here to make a correction. Since filming the video, I have educated myself on SCP by reading There Is No Anti-Memetics Division and listening to Find Us Alive, and I know now there's much more to SCP than the archives. I should have said primarily consists of wikis, as in you can engage with the fandom just by reading and writing the wikis. Okay, back to the video. Like, if you enjoy the world building, write a wiki. If you enjoy the ideas and plot snippets, share writing prompts or plot summaries. If you care the most about dialogue or characters, make an OC blog and share the interactions of those OCs. Really, if you don't want to write a novel, you can just not write a novel. And that's when I realized, Matthew, you are doing the exact same shit. If you hate elaborate editing because of how much you suck at it, and you're not passionate enough about it to improve, stop doing it. Film on a webcam with shitty lighting, put together a basic edit, and be done with it. Why deprive yourself of the joy of research, writing, filming, and sharing when you could get rid of most of the elements you currently do not enjoy? Does this feel like a failure? Yes, absolutely. The concepts I have for those complex and visually impressive essays are still there. It's not even that I always hate those things I just complained about. There are some cases where I actually loved setup and video editing, like in my Squid Games video, or the sketches in Aliens Among Us and the Academia Has an Accountability issue videos, but those are exceptions rather than rules, and they also drain me fantastically. I have to spend a week preparing for such a shoot or edit, and then a week recovering from it. The energy spent to enjoyment experience ratio is not great. So, what am I doing next? I think I will make smaller videos, in terms of camera and editing, not in terms of length, and hope that one day something will change and I will be able to execute those grand ideas. Until then, I feel like scaling way down is a smaller failure than quitting YouTube altogether. I also started a Substack where I have no theme and no schedule. I am working on an ergodic horror book that likely won't be read by anyone outside of my friend circle. I got back on Tumblr and I am working on videos that the algorithm will most likely ignore. I don't want to actively try to succeed anymore. It's not like I was trying to be a successful content creator to begin with, but there were definitely things I was doing, like querying my novel to literary agents or promoting my stuff, that caused me actual distress, and I kept doing it because I thought that the result would be worth it. And sure, I failed to get that result, but who can guarantee that even if I would get that result, it would make me happier? I worked my ass off during my masters and achieved basically every goal I set for myself. What did it get me? Pretty much fuck all. I don't feel accomplished, I have no sense of joy or pride, I didn't even have a graduation ceremony or a handshake from my supervisor. The graduation was cancelled and the thesis defense was remote, all because of COVID. Fun fact actually, I've never been to a graduation ceremony. Not after finishing high school, not for my bachelor's, not for my master's, not for music school. Either skipped or didn't get to go to any of them. So yeah, I do feel like I failed at everything. Really, a part of accepting yourself as disabled is giving up on the abled version of you and scaling down your life to a viable, survivable version. I grew to dislike the gifted child to depressed adult pipeline framework because I feel like it overstates the giftedness in a way that can quickly become ableist. Some people who talk about that pipeline fall into Aspie supremacy, which I deeply dislike. I wasn't actually gifted as a child, I was just in a part of uneven autistic development where I was ahead of my peers, and then it evened out. I am disabled with a spiky profile. I can bang out 4,000 words of text in a single 2-hour session, like I've done repeatedly while working on the script, but I still struggle with tying my shoelaces at the age of 28. There is nothing magical about me and never was. People just put that label on me and I internalized it, and now I am still unlearning the "you are meant for such great things, you have so much potential" mindset. I didn't fail at achieving the great things, I was never capable of them in the first place. Also, who said achieving great things is good anyway? For me, for people around me, for society in general? I am currently an unemployed PhD dropout with no prospects, no direction and no ambitions, and I'm happier than I've been for years. Why was the success so important for me in the first place? I mean, I know why. I've worked on it in therapy for years. It's because achievement felt like my only protection, because I believed, and still believe to some extent, that I need to be brilliant to be accepted, to be safe, physically and emotionally. Sure, success is an arbitrary metric, but as we've discussed, grocery prices and electricity bills are not, and achievement of some sort is required to earn money for most people. I don't know if I will ever feel safe as a disabled person, and therapy hasn't changed it entirely, because both of the therapists I've had in the last decade have agreed that this is a valid concern, and CBTing my way out of it would constitute gaslighting. All I can do is maintain hope that there are enough humans that will see my human value despite my lacks. This does not happen for everyone. Lots of disabled people suffer and die for so many reasons. Suicide, lack of healthcare, poverty, homelessness, caregiver neglect, police violence, even murder by the very people who they were reliant on. Denying this is not healthy or reasonable, so I cannot let go of this fear. I can only learn to live with it. As a species, a culture, a generation, whatever you feel like you belong to, we are facing the prospect of gradual civilizational failure. Yes, social media amplifies our negativity bias. Yes, we are not meant to be constantly aware of every crime against humanity and every sign of climate catastrophe happening in the world. But even disconnecting from all sources of information and news will not protect you. Most people can see it in their personal life, the raising prices of rents, the lack of progress, pay rise, and meaning in their jobs, the hollowing out of community, the loneliness, the isolation, the impending sense of doom. Focusing on yourself and your circle helps, and hope is worth maintaining. Like I've said before, hope does not require optimism. If things were going well, we wouldn't need hope. We can continuously try to achieve utopia, knowing that it is by definition impossible, because the vision is the motivation, not the final goal that you can fail to achieve. And in art too, I can continue to fail at fulfilling my own expectations and being heard, seen, or read, and keep going because of sheer spite, just to keep my head from exploding with thoughts and ideas, just to yell something into the void in a hope that someone else will notice. I would be a hypocrite if I would insist that climate action or any other kind of activism matters, even if you save just one person, and then stop sharing my work, because what is the point of making it just for 100 views and 5 comments? Sure, I will continue to try to keep balance between doing what I enjoy and getting through discomfort to improve. The first thing they teach you in every sport is how to fall down properly to minimize the damage, because they know that you will start from a lot of falling and never stop falling, no matter how good you get. I am committed to keep failing, because failure is one of the most human things we can do. AI may learn how to produce an aesthetically perfect or grammatically perfect text, but it will never make something human. So why even try to be perfect yourself? Why not just be human? And what I mean by all this is I fucking suck at Silksong, and it took me over 100 hours to get the Lost Place ending, and I think I died at least 1,000 times in those 100 hours and kinda broke my controller's jump and dash buttons by pressing it too much. Okay, bye.